And then would it just be, because I'll run in and let everyone. Okay.
Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So. One correction on the public hearing for the tax exemptions will be, the public hearing will now be held at our February meeting because we had a little issue with the notice for the newspaper.
So that's the second item?
That's the second item.
So that's postponed till February.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go ahead and go ahead and announce each individual date. The meeting dates for 2024 are the second Thursday of every month. The dates are listed here. Going down to the following, appointing the employees and the board members to their respective positions. Bob Audia will be the deputy supervisor for 4 years. On the recommendation of town clerk Chrissy Briggs, the town board appoints Kristen DeFiore as a deputy town clerk for 4 years. On the recommendation of Highway Superintendent Joe Spagnola, the town board appoints Kathleen Belletri as Deputy Highway Superintendent for 4 years. Lois Patron as bookkeeper to the supervisor. Carol Poles, Town Justice. Heather Harwood, Justice Court Clerk. Natalie Thorpe, Deputy Tax Collector. Danielle Selwich, Recreation Director. Jonathan Iolongo, Zoning Administrator and Building Inspector. James Brownell, Constable. Kathleen Morrow, Assessor's Clerk. Michael Olivet, Data Collector. And Anthony DeBonis, Animal Control Officer.
Gary, I just have one question.
Yeah.
Because Carol Pohl is an elected town justice. Do we?
What's that?
Carol Pohl is an elected town justice.
Yep.
So we would not be appointing her, correct?
I think,
She would be elected.
That's true. That's correct.
So that
Yep.
wording just needs to be.
yeah,
That's correct. Yeah, thanks for picking up on that. Okay, on the recommendation of the Town Rec Commission, the resolution to appoint Jason Zmedowski to the Rec Commission with his term expiring 12/31/2027. The Ethics Committee has one vacancy, and Mike, I think you wanted to chime in on that, right?
Yes, the ethics committee here says there is one vacancy, but Ann Gifford has accepted that position. She will fulfill the 2-year term for Carol, who had to drop off because of being elected judge.
Right.
And also Laura Allen has re-upped for another 3-year term. So that committee is filled.
Okay. This CAC has one vacancy, is that
The
correct?
CNC actually has 2 vacancies. Elizabeth Mandy rotated off and Walt Jacob. So there are 2 vacancies on
Okay.
the CAC, and there's 1 planning board vacancy and 1 alternate vacancy on the planning board. So that's correct here.
Okay. Okay, the town board liaisons. Councilman Audia, Buildings and Grounds, Short-Term Rental Legislation Committee. Councilwoman Heaney, Planning Board, Conservation Advisory Commission, Joint NRI Committee, and Climate Smart Task Force. Did I forget anything? No. Councilman Murphy, Short-Term Rental Legislation Committee Chair, Board of Ethics, Rec Commission, and Justice Court Liaison. Councilman Rochford, Comprehensive Plan Review for Hospitality, Zoning Board of Appeals, Alarm Road, and Project Manager for the Canby Road Bridge Replacement.
Oak Summit. Supposed to be Oak Summit Road. Mine was corrected years ago.
The following are interim successors in the absence of the town supervisor: Robert Audia, Michael Murphy, Joseph Rochford. Per the Code of Ethics, any elected official, employee, or volunteer with an interest in any business or organization that might come before the town must declare that interest and provide a written notice of such interest to the town supervisor. The Bank of Millbrook, as the official depository of town funds. Appoint AKRF as a consulting firm to the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals. Establish the regular meetings of the ZBA to be held on the third Tuesday of the month beginning at 7:30. And listed are all the dates. And also any submission dates for articles.
Is it correct that the materials and application should be in 3 weeks before or 2 weeks before? Maybe just the planning
I
board
think the
is 2
planning
weeks,
board's 2 weeks.
and the ZBA is 3 weeks.
That's what I referenced, yes,
Okay,
from previous.
perfect. I saw that I just thought the ZBA was too, but that's, you would know better than I, or Joe would as a liaison. I didn't know if maybe that was a,
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I think it's great. Just kidding.
Establish the regular meetings of the town planning board to be held on the first Tuesday of the month, beginning at 6 p.m. And it lists the dates.
by the way, this is new, us listing the dates, and I think it's great.
Yeah,
Okay.
That was one of the things that came out of the PACE recommendations,
Right.
is having these all posted for the entire
Okay,
year. So we're
yeah.
clear, because if there's a holiday that falls on one of them, then the date would change. So all of these dates are, Chris and I have worked on this.
awesome.
So anyway, I just want
Yeah,
to
good.
compliment Chrissy and the team for putting this
Fantastic.
together.
Good idea. Appoint the law firm of Vanderwater and Vanderwater as attorneys for the town. Authorize a supervisor to invest town funds in time or authorize investments as approved by the town board. Establish the official rate of mileage as the IRS rate of mileage of 67 cents per mile. Appoint the Poughkeepsie Journal and/or Millerton News as the official newspaper for legal notices. Approve the procurement of a blanket undertaking from a duly authorized corporate surety covering the officers, clerks, and employees. Any such blanket undertaking must indemnify against losses caused by the failure of the officers and employees to faithfully perform their duties or by their fraudulent or dishonest acts. Approve the compensation of all employees within the limits of the appropriated funds as established in the 2023 budget. All non-salaried full-time employees are to receive time and a half for hours worked over 40 hours per week when approved in advance by their direct supervisor. Establish the rates of compensation for all officials and employees as indicated in the 2024 budget without a previous audit from the town board. Okay, we did go over the planning board vacancy, the fixed vacancy, CAC vacancy, right?
Sorry, that was
Okay.
redundant.
You got that right. Then next are the listing of the employees and elected officials and their salaries. That is the extent of the reorganization meeting. Is there any questions from anybody? Yes, sir, Jeff.
Thank you. Jeffrey S. Benstoni for the record. I hope I'm not making anyone uncomfortable by appearing here tonight. I felt I should come out. I just wanted to say a few things. It'll take just a couple of minutes.
Yep.
I serve as a town justice in the town of Pleasant Valley. I think you all know that. Vandewater and Vandewater is the firm which represents the planning board in Pleasant Valley. So a state committee has issued an opinion holding that you can't do both. You can't have one attorney in a firm serving as a town justice and have other attorneys in a firm representing the planning board in the same town. So the firm had to make a decision. They had to decide whether to stop representing the planning board in Pleasant Valley and keep it, or whether to continue to represent that planning board and disaffiliate them. Sadly for me, they decided to do the latter. They've represented the planning board in Pleasant Valley for probably at least 40 years, would be my guess. So it's a long-term client for them. I've been doing your legal work for over 10 years now. I would like to continue. I would like to be appointed as the attorney for the town. That's entirely up to you. I understand fully your long-term affiliation with Vandewater, with John Gifford in particular. John is someone I have great respect and admiration for. And I did just want to say that I've been doing your work for over 10 years. And in that time, I've been treated very well by every town official and every town employee who I've had to deal with. And in turn, I think I've gotten along very well with every official and town employee I've had to deal with. So I did want to come out here tonight and just say those things and ask you to consider those things.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you very much.
And thank you for the wonderful work that
No,
you've
thank you. I
done.
appreciate it.
We love you, Jeff.
Um,
Say that.
So if there's no other comments or questions, motion to close the reorg meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So are we,
There's another section in the back that you can probably cover. Claims as presented. The annual audit of the accounts of the town.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
Budget,
back of that
the
one,
town
yeah.
clerk, tax collector,
yeah, we have to do that separately.
right?
So now, I'm 6:15. Should we go ahead and open the public hearing on the short-term rental?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
I mean,
second it.
Did you want to open it now? Did you want to wait? Or,
I mean, we can
suspect
open
that-
it, but we don't have to take any action because, well, we need to ask if there's somebody here who wishes to make comment, and we can keep it open. We can keep it open. I don't,
I think
6 p.m.
I think it was
It was
noticed
a-
for 6 o'clock.
6
6
o'clock.
o'clock.
So whenever you guys are ready.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, because the agenda appears longer, people may think that the conversation isn't happening until later, but
Yeah,
it was noticed for 6 o'clock, so.
Okay.
But is there something else that we need, business that we need to do that we would want to address before that?
well, we could certainly do that. Let's officially open the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Was there anything in particular, Leslie, you had in mind that you wanted to talk about?
The short-term rental?
No, I mean for.
Any business of the board.
any other-
Oh, no, I just didn't know, review claims as presented. Is that something we have? We still
That's
need
for
to do?
that is for. We normally have to do the court stuff,
The court audit and
right?
The bookkeeping.
And the bookkeeper.
yeah.
Those records
Okay.
are in that other
Right,
office.
they'll
If you
bring
want me to bring them in.
You want me to bring them in here?
But we
No,
usually
No.
do that at the end, right?
yeah,
Right, that's why I put it at the end.
yeah.
So,
I can bring them in here if you'd like.
Okay.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Oh,
I just,
Yeah. Got a wheelbarrow?
Kathleen can't get on.
Was Joe coming in today?
He told me he would.
Okay. And everybody else, John,
Jonathan's
here.
He was sworn in.
Okay.
Everyone,
All right, so
so it'll just be Ann Gifford,
there's nobody on Zoom.
nobody on Zoom.
So how long do you want to keep them?
I think
Well, we have to.
at least till 6:30, I would think.
Okay.
Jonathan, do you have anything you want to talk to us about?
No, I knew it was a short-term rental public hearing tonight, so I just wanted to be here for that.
Okay, good.
I can inform the board that we've taken steps to reach out to Granicus. This falls under short-term rental, just to assist us with starting to identify whether the law was go through or not, of where and who possibly are short-term rentals within the town of Washington. As we know from looking back into June of 2021 or sooner or earlier, that the county had given us a number that we were working from, but that was never validated other than periodically the county being able to tell us that so many of what they assumed to be short-term rentals in the town of Washington had paid the taxes for the occupancy tax that's required at 9%. But to where they were located, who owned them and whatever, was difficult for us to do without the local law requiring for people to come in and actually get a permit. So we've spoken to Granicus and they have sent us a blueprint on how to start to put together and what departments would be involved in trying to analyze through our assessment records and our residential property records of who may be the short-term rentals in the town of Washington by they analyzing the various platforms that their company peruses periodically to see who's advertising, where they're advertising, and what they're advertising.
Right.
So we reached out to Granicus, completed some paperwork. I've met with Jonathan and with Lisa in the assessor's office to go over what the protocols and procedures will be. There will be some paperwork that we will need to generate to supply to them. There will also be some Zoom online training that both Lisa's department and Jonathan will go through. And they, understanding that I am no longer the point person for the Granicus contract, because now that we have a building inspector that basically will be the enforcement office, whether we had a law or not, we still would have to enforce some of these properties that were not operating under a current local law. So that's where we stand right now. It's probably going to take several months for that to rotate in. It will require making sure that any of the properties that pop up with Granicus and we look at in the assessor's office don't already have certain exemptions on their properties, like an ag exempt or whatever, because it would be important for Granicus to know that, particularly if the law does get passed, they would be supplied with our law and all the restrictions that we're requiring on anyone that would be operating a short-term rental in town. So that's a step that we took a couple of weeks ago, and we've held one meeting already to review those procedures. They sent us a printout. Chrissy, you were in that meeting, popping on and being able to do a research assessment, and then certain forms that need to be filled out, and the blueprint that the departments would have to work with as far as plugging in information. And once that information is gathered, it would be presented to Granicus, and then they would inform us on what's going on with those properties. So that's in the works right now.
Once, Mike, once this is all done, the enforcement part of it, will someone be able to sit down with Jonathan and go over
Yes.
his
There will be a
responsibility?
team of, I believe there were 5 people from the company that will be assigned to the town of Washington. And each one of those 5 have a certain duty and responsibility, one of whom would be a direct contact with Jonathan's office.
Okay.
Another one would be a direct contact with the assessor's office. And then obviously when I meet with them periodically, see how things are going,
Right.
I could be a contact back to them to say, here's issues that have popped up. Where do you stand on it? Or here's change in a state law, or here's change in other local laws and so on.
So are we notifying the existing short-term rental people that they now have to?
If the law was,
If
if the law was to be passed,
Yeah.
the Granicus and us would make that public knowledge, and they actually will assist us in drafting communication letters using our letterhead. And that would all go through Chrissy's office and the building inspector's office.
So
The assessor's office is important because that would give us the plots of the properties, where they're exactly located, who the owners are. But our application for permits also asks for that information, whether it's owned by a private resident or it's owned by an LLC or corporation. But yes, they will help getting that word out that it's required. And if the law does get passed, whenever it gets passed, there will be a little bit of a grace period for people to come in because, quite frankly, it's all going to be new. But even if that law didn't get passed, I think it's important for us to know within the town of what we think might be between 25 and 40. Who are these people and where are they?
Yeah. What is the enforcement mechanism? So does Granicus oversee it, or does our team here oversee if people are if neighbors are complaining, let's say,
There
who does the complaint go to?
goes to both.
Both.
It goes, if it's a off hour from our office
Yeah.
hours, it would go to Granicus.
Okay.
Granicus would have all the contact information that would be generated off of our application, as well as off of what they see being advertised on the platforms as contact people. They would handle it first if it was off hours. But if they handle it, a verbal and printed copy goes to Jonathan's office of that complaint
Okay.
or that enforcement. If Jonathan handles it, Jonathan takes care, or that office handles it, Jonathan takes care of that. Granicus gets a copy of what we've done, so the
I see.
file on those properties are all up to date.
And then would Jonathan then come to the board and say, we've had 3 complaints or 2 complaints over this particular
Probably a monthly
property?
report.
Yeah.
And I'll keep that
And then he'll just
liaison
know,
with
and
him,
then we can decide if
and
they,
depending on what the level of the issues
Right.
are, would determine whether the applicant would continue having the application or the
Permit,
application
have a
gets
permit.
withdrawn. Very similar to what the building inspector does now on the construction site.
right, okay.
So that is all going to be contiguous with the 2 departments working together. And that is for a full year commitment to Granicus to do
Now,
that.
does Granicus have any, would they give us any feedback on whether or not we can we find, because it's taking our time, well, Jonathan's time, to go over and enforce these, or, talk to them about what happened and follow up on these complaints. Are there mechanisms where we can charge a fee for that to the permit holder if we are getting complaints?
The fee structure is not built into the law, but a fee structure can, once we get the law
Yeah.
passed, can be established in that office.
Great,
Similar to what the fee structure is already on penalties for construction
Great.
sites.
perfect.
The other thing too is Granicus, because they're assessing these platforms all the time, can see if the comments made that are sometimes required by the platforms. Because the owner of the short-term rental that's going off a platform signs a contract with the platform. The platform also requires certain restrictions on that property. Granicus can tell if the listings are adhering to the guidelines that are established under the contract
see,
of the
okay.
platform.
Like the
So if
number of
there are
occupants. and
A
things
number of
like that.
occupants, if the platform says, hours of outside activity is 11 o'clock, ours is 11, but they may have a different one.
Or it's a commercial yoga retreat or
Correct,
whatever. that
correct,
kind of thing.
correct.
Great,
So that is more, I believe their company is more dedicated to that constant oversight through computer accessing. Because they've said to us, if they look at a platform, a particular address, and it says occupancy 8, and they were marketing it for 12,
yeah,
that's a violation.
So Mike, what happens, let's say there's a complaint in the middle of the night, let's say. How do the people that are making the complaint, how do they know where to call?
Under our law, the addresses are, the neighbors of wherever these are located will be informed through our office that this is a
24-hour
short-term
person.
rental, and here's a company that the town is working with to oversee the properties as far as following the regs. So the neighbors will have Granicus's phone number, Granicus's hotline, so that if Granicus, if it happened at 2 a.m., somebody shoots off fireworks, and the neighbor will have the Granicus phone number. It's a 24-hour hotline to Granicus. The call would go there. Granicus would immediately contact their person that owns that properties. Then the following day, we would get a printout that violation came in at 2 a.m. and here's how it was resolved.
We can also advertise
We can tell
on
the
our
Gran-
website.
We can,
yeah.
and Granicus is giving us a template to be able to do
Right.
that.
Comments from
6:29.
from the crowd here?
Yeah, but I think there's people that think the reorg maybe takes longer than it
Oh,
does.
look.
There's one
think
right
you're
there.
right.
Yeah,
No,
so,
maybe not.
so,
I mean, the other part, doing the, you know, should we start doing that? That's not a executive session thing, going over those bills if we're waiting for,
No,
right?
I don't know if we want to do that.
Okay.
Here, if you don't mind, I came out for the organizational part of the
Okay.
meeting. I don't need to sit through the public hearing on the short-term rental part, so I'm gonna head home.
okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Jeff.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you very
Jeff,
much.
thanks.
It's very nice.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
evening.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep. Yeah, because I know there's people that are gonna be here. Yeah, I just don't want to start this and trying to do, what are you trying to hide, you know?
Howard,
It was
sure,
advertised.
it's
at 6
open.
o'clock,
Do you have,
though,
I
right?
mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have
Yes.
comments.
Not too many. I don't
Well,
think it'll change
The village
anything.
has their short-term rental.
There is
meeting.
this tonight too.
I
What's
know.
that?
The village has their short-term rental meeting tonight as well.
Yes.
Oh, they do?
Mhm.
Do you want to get, do you want to, since it's an open meeting, do you want to share your, if you don't have comments,
I have a couple of brief ones, but rather than going into a lot of needless detail, we're not gonna be, if I'm the only one presenting anything. I doubt you change anything. See my point? I could say a couple of things, but I was hoping there'd be more people here first to have something to say.
More people here to hear your comments?
No,
Maureen?
no, more people to be having a discussion.
well, we're not going to close the public hearing right now, but since you're here and we're all just listening to air, we'd love to listen to you, Howard.
All right,
instead
I'll
of air.
talk some time, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can
But the
go
public
over a couple
hearing
of
will
minor
be-
There's not-
points.
Yeah,
It's
oh
not
yeah, but I'm
often,
saying we're
No, no.
still giving it a little more time.
So Howard,
Yeah,
draft number 3 was posted and I assume you read it, so now you may have some comments. So we're open to accepting your
I have a
comments right
couple.
now.
I read it.
Of course,
I read
if he doesn't have one.
yours.
He said he has a couple, so let's get him in the record.
you know, it's not often, Howard, that we request your comments, you know, so take advantage of it.
Please note that in the minutes.
I sure will.
Where's your,
He's got it.
oh, it's
No, it's
there.
over here.
Okay, I
There.
didn't see it.
All right, the first thing that I was a little concerned about is who is this meant to be the primary beneficiary of this law? Because most people, it's to have a person whose primary residence is going to be used to make a little extra income. And the government defines primary residence as 6 months in a day. And you have 100. I think 100 is way too low unless there's a target audience that you want 100 for. So I would like to see what most of the people are putting in theirs in other towns. And that it'd be a year, it's 6 months in a day that to qualify as a primary residence for somebody to apply. I think the 100 could be discussed, and if people agree with that, I think you should go with what most people are doing for that. The other thing is not a comment on this per se, but there must be a reason why all of these various communities are regulating these now. It seems that as time goes on, more of them are being regulated around the country, not just here. And the reason is probably because they need regulation, otherwise they wouldn't be doing that. It's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have to be very careful with what you put in, because there's probably a reason why it has to be done in the first place. All right, so email handwriting.
Howard, understand that. Say that last thing you just said.
The last thing is that looking at this as a cause and effect, when these things first came out, there wasn't a lot of urgency to do regulations. But as time went on, different communities found they needed to do regulations for different reasons. So that there's probably something indigenous with this whole short-term regulations that needs communities to look at them, that they generated their own need for having it looked at and validated in each community. And normally, if everything is going well, that doesn't happen. So I'm not saying yours, I'm saying there's probably a general reason why these things are regulated. And I think you have to err on the eye of caution. I think the most important thing is to regulate something that is in the benefit of the whole community. Yours, if you don't pardon me for saying so, seems to have a commercial flavor to it. The village seems to be more interested in preserving the community itself as it exists presently. This has the potential to change the community. And there's a lot of literature about what happens in some communities when these things get a little out of hand, such as dark sections of the town because nobody's renting in the middle of the winter or whatever. And the price of other existing areas that would have been part of the community are no longer there. So there's a shortage of rentals now for people who live here, and then the prices go up. So there's all these other things. I think a lot of it can be solved by going back to that. It has to be the person who's there. That person's is a primary resident. It's not somebody coming in from a corporation necessarily to be there and to fill out 100 days somehow over the year. It has to be the person primary residence, and that has to be a year and 6 months and a day, which is what the federal government defines as primary residence for tax purposes normally and other things. So I'd like to see that changed. I think in the long term would benefit the community to do that. A minor thing I had was I think 11 o'clock is a little late on noise ordinances. Most people, not most, but the ones I've looked at, a lot of them have 10 instead of 11. So I'm suggesting that you consider that. I had nothing else to say about the noise ordinance other than that. One of the other questions I had was, how do you know a person is actually there? Do you have a mechanism for enforcing or checking that this person really is there at that point? They're not just saying, I'm here for so many days and they're really not there.
You talk about the property owner?
Whoever you decide, yes, the property owner, the primary property owner. But in yours, if I read it correctly, it does say that the person who represents whatever is there is the primary person. How do you know that person's really there all the time?
Well, I guess the registered agent, you mean?
There's in yours and in others, there's a designation of a primary person.
Yeah.
How do you, and there's a different number of days in yours and others, but still the same primary person. Most of them say it's a residence. How do you know that person is really there all the time, that he's supposed to be there? That just occurred to me personally when I was reading through them. How do you verify, what's the verification process for that? Since we're discussing, is there an answer?
No, we're just taking comment right now.
Oh, just taking comment, okay. I don't like the idea of somebody not coming to answer a complaint right away, depending on what the complaint is. That Granicus people report back to the town in the next day, as opposed to a call to somebody who will be representing that property, if they're not the owner, there at the property, who will get there within an hour or so, which I think comes up somewhere in your language. But the fact that if I, the neighbor, called in and I said, this is happening, nothing's going to be done about it until next day. I think that's not right, Mike?
That's not what's in the draft number 3.
Okay. Correct me, please.
It's 30 minutes then.
No, he's speaking. Besides the owner information that we will have, and we will be working to get. There is also mandated in the law that there has to be a representative of that owner who kind of is the site manager if the owner is absent. And that person has to be within, I believe, and I don't have the law in front of me, so it's in there. You can read it. They have to be within, I think, 15-minute drive of the property in order to address the issue in person.
And to answer the earlier question, I think if they weren't there, how do you know if they're there? If they're not there and there's no one that's responsive, we will get that report. And that the enforcement mechanism is to actually remove their permit if this becomes a consistent problem.
The other thing, Howard, along that line too, when we assess this, many of these establishments are not vacant when they're not solicited for rent. The owner basically is there, and when it gets rented, the neighbor or the owner vacates while the renter is there. So if I don't have any renters in my piece of property for a month and I decide to go away, of course that house is going to be empty.
No, that's not what my question was. The 100 days or half year, how do you know the person's really in that building as his primary residence during that time?
You mean
Like,
physically?
I don't see I wouldn't know if my neighbor left for a week or two at a
Correct, you
time.
wouldn't.
And so how do you, is there a mechanism to meet that qualification? 100 days seems to be tailored to people who are summer residents, basically, that come up for the weekend. And how do you know they're coming up all those weekends?
That will be part of the application process when they're questioned.
I don't understand that.
Everyone,
How would you know the person came up from the city and was there those number of
the
days?
question will be asked of, how many days do you occupy your residence?
So it's,
We're saying that it's a minimum of 100.
so it's basically trusting the person.
I would hope everyone would trust everyone periodically.
Howard, maybe you volunteer to check them all. Just keep an eye on
it. Well,
I just thought I'd get a little.
and you're an official. But the other thing I was concerned about is closeness to the other neighbors. I was thinking that, especially in the smaller zones, there has to be more separation between these properties and the neighbors. And maybe it could be something that says if you have to have at least a minimum separation from your neighbor. And in larger zones, it's easier to do. And I was thinking that there could be some separation requirements for these. And I didn't see anything mentioned about that, and that was just a thought of my own that if you.
In draft number 3, you did see if it was in a zone of an acre or less,
Yes,
that there has to be delineated property lines between the properties so that the property owner and the property neighbor and the renter knows where the rented property begins and ends.
that's not what the concern would be. The concern would be like that person who lived on Oak Summit Road, I believe it was. And so to hear the person next door all the time. And it sort of diminished the value of his property or her property, whoever wrote that article. And I was thinking it should be something built in, perhaps limiting the number of people that can go in these smaller places if they don't have enough separation from the neighbors. You're on a very large parcel, the 10 acre zone, for example. You could probably put in something that says you have to be, say, 1,000 feet away from your neighbor or something like that. So piece of the rest of the community that lives in that area. And they could probably do that. But if you're in a 1, 2, or 5 acre zone, even, you maybe can't do that. And having 8 people or 6 people in there may be a little burdensome on the rest of the people that live in that zone. So I was thinking that you could put in something that you can be in a 1 acre zone and have about 5 or 6 acre property. So it's something that would allow for a little quiet separation in the smaller zones by limiting the number of people that go in there instead. That's basically most of what I have.
Thank you for your comments, Howard.
So Adelaide, just so you know, our other meeting was quick.
Oh, yeah, I figured, God, I'd be here like, that would be an hour, over 2 hours.
Right, that's kind of what we thought. We did technically open the public hearing, so it's open for comment.
Right.
I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Howard, for all those wonderful comments.
Well, I was hoping that I would not be the first one.
Well, that was a pretty long agenda. I got panicked and thought the STR wasn't happening. I called a couple of you, like, oh my God. It
Yeah.
was in the, 5th page, so I figured I had plenty of time. So I wrote, can I speak now or is
Of course.
Okay. I did bring my letter. I just put some brief comments together, and since they got to you so late. I brought
Adelaide,
hard
just to
comments.
let you know, is that the letter that you forwarded to Gary that before with the comments from the
Ron, my husband?
Correct.
Yeah, no, but I emailed that to you also.
And that has been distributed to all the committee members and the board members, and it's also part of Chrissy's file on this subject matter.
Okay, great. Well, I emailed it to, Leslie first, and she's the only attorney on the board.
And that's been recorded and given to everyone also.
Did you have any comments or questions about those?
No,
Did you use any of them?
you need to make the comments.
Oh, okay. Well, that was a comment. That was a question. Okay, so my comments on tonight were just on these 4 points in this one page, probably the shortest letter I think I've ever written. So I wanted to thank you for the significant changes that have come along since the first draft. Clearly, a lot of improvements. And, as I listened to Howard speak, I think of, and as I'm here, I thought of a lot of details that I might not have put in here. It's very difficult to analyze the law, from the outside without being part of the process all along the way. So, you forget and may not mention things. So, the comments here are just about the general comment that I think that the bed and breakfast law is really ideally where I would prefer to see these things regulated under that, where they had to come to the planning board and get a special permit. To me, I just think it's better. I know that you're not going to go there, but I just wanted for the record to say that I think, and so does Theodore Fink and a lot of planners think that the bed and breakfast regulations are the best way to regulate these hospitality places that have multiple guests. And with bed and breakfast, it's 10. But so that's my comment on that. And because there's a bed and breakfast law already in the zoning, and when I read this, I have to, let me go back to Theodore Fink for a minute. I highly recommend you read this letter. It came from Charles Gottlieb. And I just happened to read it from the comp plan committee. And he had attached this Theodore Fink, a really great planning letter about how this whole comprehensive planning update should happen. And it was really good. But anyway, he mentioned that the bed and breakfast law, and a lot of people know, is just the best way to handle hospitality issues in a rural community, especially. Because of that, because you're not doing that, I would say I would love to see the limit lower than 40. I know you think you have 40 now or something, but I'm not really sure where that number came from, but I would say that below 40 would be great. I think I would prefer the gold standard of an owner occupant, requirement while they're renting this out year round, but I know that's not where you're going with this. But I'm happy to see the requirement of ownership of at least a year. I thought that was a great idea. But I'm curious how you came up with 100 days as a primary residence definition. And maybe it's, as Howard said, maybe people with multiple homes that maybe are here only that very little time. Because the primary residency, one of the standard thresholds for that is 100, like village has 6 months in a day. And I think that's the tax code, the primary resident,
Yeah.
definition.
It is.
It's like a more standard one. So it's like 80 days more. But that seemed to me like it would make more sense. Unless unless you're writing this for specific individuals. You know, and that feels like how it may be written. So regarding the local contact person, I didn't give you a lot of suggestions here. I mean, I didn't redraft it, only to say that the neighbors are really important, and I think the conditions under which they have a remedy in a situation late at night are really crucial. And the whole thing that Howard was talking about, how soon people get back. And so I'm glad to see there has to be a contact there. But I think it needs to be a little stronger and a little more spelled out about how that person responds to the neighbor. Because we're the ones that are going to experience all the issues. I have 3 very large STRs within 2 miles of my home. This law could trigger 2 giant houses near me into an STR if they change hands. So that's my concern. And one of them is 500 feet away. That's not very far away. You hear a lot of sound from 500 feet away. So to Howard's point, and I think we've discussed this before, you really got to consider where the house is, because if they might have 100 acres or 50 acres or 20 acres and be in the middle of it, it's a different story. But if they have less than that or 50 acres, but they're close to an old house on the road, or they're in the front of the property, they may be quite close to neighbors. So there isn't a lot of talk of noise or loud music or those kinds of things in the draft. And that's where that would become a real issue. Because I know I hear people talking 500 feet away. If it's on a hill, if there's leaves down, if somebody's talking loudly, if their music's up, you can hear that from a long distance. So if you had 10 people there, thank you for your lovely smile tonight. You really, that's nice. I'm just get a little sunlight in here at night. So the issue of distance and noise is really important. I didn't see anything about, I thought you had more about noise in the last draft, but maybe I missed it. I don't know if it's in there, but I love that
Noise is in there.
that you just, it's motor vehicles and stuff like that, ATVs, right? And I think, was there music?
And public noise, party noise.
That's
It's
detailed?
the 11 o'clock curfew, but there's more strict on what's not allowed, like fireworks.
Yeah, that's great.
ATVs, motorcycles,
Okay, that's great.
gunshots, whatever.
Great. And no hunting and all that. The quiet hours, I didn't think 11, I thought 11 PM was too late, actually. I'd love to see that earlier. And for the same reason, because if you have 8 people and they have an event or a party, there's a lot of noise that could happen quite easily. And that was my other question. Events, are they events prohibited? I don't remember seeing that in law. Because that's a very common prohibition in STR laws. That they prohibit, so you can't rent one and say, I'm gonna have a small wedding here on the weekend. Now you're rolling your eyes, Joseph, maybe you have a question.
No, I'm not rolling.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Did my head turn?
No.
There's mine.
Yeah.
This isn't,
Okay, just use a signal to,
Okay.
so is there an events clause? Yeah,
I don't believe there's an events clause, but there's an enforcement on noise clause.
so there's nothing in there that says you can't have an event. That's kind of a problem.
The town zoning
Prevents that.
prevents
Oh,
events.
It does.
Yes,
It does.
you need
prevent
permits.
breakfast
I think
or
you need,
just
I think
for-
you need to have a
Like
permit.
You need to
if
have
you're
permits
gonna
for
have
parties
a
and
large
weddings.
event.
I don't know how they define event then in the law.
I don't know.
I've made a note about, and this is a question, for council, just around, if we have a noise ordinance in our STR law, is it something we want to consider broadly so that it's consistent and has
I
more
would think
teeth?
that should be a discussion during
Yeah.
the year.
Yeah.
and
For sure.
Incorporating one.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that'd make more sense, not more sense, I'm not saying that it makes great sense to do, if we're gonna do it for the short-term rentals, we
Right.
should have it be universal
Right.
for everybody, and that way.
And research how that is
Yes,
determined and how it's enforced.
how it's enforced, because, it just gives it gives a neighbor more.
I know Connecticut
More
has
teeth.
just enforced or established a new noise ordinance through most of their communities in wild sensors and so on.
Well,
but the enforcement's the
Dover
key.
has one, it's
Right.
worth us looking at.
Well, Washington
For
is
the
one of
town.
only a couple towns in the whole county.
And that would help
Yeah.
planning and zoning with that kind of
Yeah,
universal.
it would just help, I think, Jonathan too, on an
Correct.
enforcement basis. So I just made a note of that, but that's something that,
Good.
I know we've talked about, but I think it makes sense if we're incorporating it into this, that we have that be uniform in how we're applying it, throughout the town.
And Adelaide, just to give you some confidence when it comes to neighbors, you
Yeah.
happen, unfortunately, you weren't here, but that's here or there. I explained the process that will be going on with informing whether the law gets passed or not, informing neighbors
Oh,
of
good.
the existence of short-term rentals.
Great.
And that will happen through written and posted information on our website, but actual letters that will go to neighbors,
Right.
giving
From the
them contact numbers, giving them contact people. If in their experience with the short-term rental, there are some complaints that need to be made, and how those complaints will be reacted to, both immediately, next day, or the day of kind of visits that will occur.
So you're saying that that's explained to the neighbors in these letters?
Yes,
Oh, that's great. I'm sorry I missed that. I really thought you guys would be a lot more long-winded than I am. My apologies. But, yeah, so, well, that's a huge relief. And that's actually the main reason I wanted it to go to the planning board, because I worry about neighbor notification. And also, I know Ron made comments like when they change the contact, or the contact has a different phone number, some method that the neighbors can be, it's some mechanism where the neighbors are updated when there's changes. I think he put that in the edits. And parking was one of my last comments, is that I know that, there's a lot of fields around where people can just park wherever. So how do you control that?
in the draft, it is required that as part of the plot diagram that needs to be presented at the time of application, they have to show on the plot diagram specifically where the cars will be parked. Not on lawns, in a designated squared out area, or however they determine how to design that, but that is in the law. And that has to be presented at the time of application so that the building inspector knows exactly where those automobiles will be parked. None can be done on roads. It has to be on the property in the designated plotted area on the template.
Okay. So can you just go over a little bit the grievance process, that if a neighbor had an issue, let's say you have a problem, a loud noise or something at night,
Well,
what do they do?
I can repeat what we repeated before.
Again,
The,
I don't know how
um,
many times I can apologize.
the neighbors
but
will
it's a
have
long
it-
agenda you have there.
The neighbors will have in their possession, at the time that we verify that there is an existing short-term rental,
Mhm.
and they have been issued an application, the neighbors will be notified that the short-term rental exists within their area. And in that notification will be the building inspector, our building inspector's name, address, phone number, email address, and so on. Granicus, which is the company we will be contracting with, who will be overseeing violations through assessing the various platforms that these short-term rentals are listed upon, will also supply, through the contract that we have, a form notification that will go to neighbors, giving Granicus's contact numbers and Granicus's 24-hour hotline. Granicus, if they were to get a complaint at 2 in the morning, because it happens on a late Friday night, our office isn't open, they have immediate contact with the owner and with the owner's designated property manager if the owner isn't that person themselves. And that takes place immediately. When that action takes place, they will enforce whatever the rules are in what we're demanding of that property, whether it's 11 o'clock or 4 cars or whatever, or 8 people. That will be enforced immediately. A record of that will be sent the following day electronically to our office, stating what the resolution was. And our office will follow up on that complaint, either by a site visit or some kind of communication to make sure the issue has been resolved. If the issue is, if there are several issues with that particular piece of property, just like with building inspectors and permits issued for building properties, the building inspector can pull the permit. Therefore, that's a cease and desist immediately. Now, some of the complaint might be, we're renting the property and we found that the batteries in the smoke alarms weren't working. That might not be an immediate phone call, but it might be a phone call when they communicate back to the platform and the platform renter company notifies Granicus that we got a complaint that the batteries weren't in there. Granicus either will contact, or if it's our obligation, we contact, fix the batteries, we check it out, the complaint's been resolved. But if it's something like fireworks at 2 in the morning or a big party going on at 3 in the morning, Granicus would handle that immediately with the owner of the property and or the person that's designated by the owner to be the immediate, within 15-minute drive of the property, to resolve that immediately.
So the neighbor doesn't have that person's number?
Yes, they will. They will have Granicus's number.
No, but they won't have the contact number.
They will have the knowledge of who the owner of the property is. I don't know specifically on the application. I'd have to look at it again. But they will have the information. Our office will have the information.
No, your office isn't open at the moment.
No. The owner would have the information for our office and the owner.
But Granicus is 24/7. So if you do call them, they then contact. And if nobody comes and there's a noise issue,
Right.
and it happens more than,
Shut them down.
then the person gets shut down, and they can no longer have.
And that, remember, the application is a 2-year application. So within a 2-year period, if a person isn't overseeing their property properly and there are multiple violations, that can get pulled anytime within that 2-year period. They're out. And then if they wanted to reapply, they would go to the bottom of the list if there was a list. Now, you mentioned 40 is what the number we think we're working from, because the county has told us that there were 40 tax numbers allocated.
Mhm.
But in our committee's research with Granicus, who for free gave us some assessments, there seems to be only 25 that seem to be active at all times. So the real number might be 25. We're not sure of that. We won't be until we find out if the law is passed. We validate 25. But if the law is not passed, Granicus can still tell us there's been 25 company or STRs that have been constantly paying their occupancy tax. But we've made a maximum, no matter when it occurs, throughout a 2-year or a 1-year period, a maximum when the permits hit 40, that's it. No more than 40. So if the 40 get them and all 40 keep them, that's fine. But if number 40 decides this has not been lucrative to me, I'm no longer going to do it, and it opens up another slot, then somebody that may be on a waiting list or somebody new to the community that wants to open an STR, if we're at 39, they would get a permit. The permit is $1,050 and it's a 2-year permit. And the reason we settled on the $1,050, we did an analysis 3 years ago on what it costs the building inspector's time, all of the paperwork, all of the allocation that we have to go through, the legal fees and so on. And that based on, we didn't even base it on 40. We based it on 30, I think 33 or 32. And we multiplied that out and it came to the figure of $1,050.
That's fine. I'm still stuck on the fact that I don't have a phone number for somebody to call other than Granicus.
You will have the phone number for Granicus.
No, not other than Granicus.
A phone number
For the
besides
contact.
Granicus.
For the,
Like-
the contact, the agent, property manager, and,
The owner of the house.
You will know the owner of the house because you'll have the address. I'll have to look at what the application says. I'm going off the top of my head.
that's
We
fine.
may
I
have
was
put
looking
in
for where
there-
this
I
is
think it's
in
there.
law.
Richard believes it
Yeah,
is there.
I thought I read that.
So you would be notified of all of the information
It has to be
that
in the application.
that we would have.
And the neighbor decides,
Yes, the
right?
only thing we would try to emphasize, if there is a complaint, that our channels are followed first. We would want to try to avoid neighbor fighting with neighbor.
I will say, Mike,
So actually-
on the draft of the permit, that will have to be presented at a
Yeah.
place anyone can see,
Mhm.
does have a spot in there for property owner or representatives.
Right, I believe, I knew we
Right,
had
that's
that.
what I thought.
So there will be
And the neighbor
contact.
gets.
The neighbor
No,
receipt was,
You won't get
yeah,
the permit, but
But
They'll get the
application,
information.
the information
I
will
just want the
be.
information in front
Yes.
of her. I have been in this situation, you know, it's not,
Yeah.
I don't
Thanks,
want to call
Jonathan.
it grant, I don't
Yeah,
want to
and
call it.
hopefully though, if we move forward with this noise ordinance, which I think makes good sense for us that we're consistent,
Yeah,
there will be some other enforcement mechanism, and I don't know how other towns handle it, if they
Right.
call the police or what they
Right.
do after hours, but,
right, number of
we'll have
complaints or something.
yeah, we'll have to, I would anticipate that there'd be some other enforcement mechanism,
Yeah.
that would be relative to that,
I would also-
broader ordinance.
just for public information. As we've been working on this and getting closer and closer to a final draft, we've been asking both the county, Granicus, and our own building inspector,
Mhm.
how many complaints have actually come in on what we assume to be the number of properties within our town.
Yeah.
And over the last several years, there's been at the most 3 per year, at the most, which means those people that are currently operating out of compliance per se, because there is no permitting mechanism right now in the town. There has not been a lot of problems with them. We're just trying to give codes so that everybody knows what's expected, both as the owner, the neighbor, and the neighborhood.
Right, I understand that. I think sometimes people don't realize that in the town, because it's rural and people are on bigger plots, that I think a lot of times it's assumed, especially if you live in the village and you live next to people that you grew up with, that you have a hey neighbor kind of person right there.
A rapport.
Yeah, and a knowledge, someone that really you get to know. So on larger estates, that's not always the case. So it's a property manager, or it's, so there are those issues, and I think that, that's my. noise
Contact
maker.
information is important, and, yeah,
And we need that company. We need that information also as a town.
Right. I know, because I know that enforcement sometimes in the town has been kind of an issue, and there are some issues around that in my area that I've only discovered through this process of large ones operating without regulation. So it'll be good to know and find out how you come down on that.
yeah, would there be I would assume if, there are, I've certainly brought things to the attention of the building inspector, so
Yeah.
if there are things that are operating that are commercial entities in a residential area, you should absolutely contact the building inspector about that, so they can follow up and make sure that they're in
Yeah.
compliance. We had that with that inn that was right at the intersection there that was operating, without the proper permitting. So I would encourage you,
Right.
to do that if you know of them now. And I'm sure Granticus, they could help us flag those things and look as we're identifying those.
Just to let you know,
properties now.
Adelaide, previously, the assessor's office is also involved in this process. So this company that we will be dealing with in Jonathan's office will be working with the assessor's office, because in looking at the applicants, their names and addresses and where these establishments are, we're under the assumption that in order to be a quality short-term rental, some people may have made adjustments to their houses that we have not been aware of. So this will help us, and Granicus will also help us looking at these properties to be able to tell our assessor's office, this one property up on Horseshoe Road now has a huge patio and a deck that we go back to the building inspector's office and we pull the file and we see that they maybe didn't have permits for, that allows us to do some other things outside of short-term rental to make sure that we're looking at all the properties in the town, and all the properties in the town are meeting the existing codes.
Right, I think there are issues like that.
Well, they're sure.
So that will help us.
So the only other thing I would come back to is my last point, because it's kind of a broad, finer point that kind of summarizes a lot of what's happened with this process and also with the hospitality law process. And it's that finding that letter from Charles Gottlieb on your comp plan committee and his edition of green planning and Mr. Theodore Fink's planning description of an ideal planning process when you're making zoning changes. And one of the things that really struck me is how important it is to have the public participation. And not just at a public hearing like this that's required by law, but in the process, in the drafting process. So I know, like, I think it's Milan or this little tiny town, I have to double check it, in Columbia County, that has a zoning committee, and they have regular meetings. So there's an open meeting where people can come and listen to the things that are anticipated and tell them, hey, listen, I know this happened to me, that happened to me, and give them their feedback of what it's like to actually live in the neighborhood and what happens. And so how the zoning law would affect them. So I just think in the future, if, you know, part of the issue that was very difficult for me, and I know a lot of others, although there aren't many of them here, because people do get burned out, it's been going on for months. I'm sort of a glutton for punishment in that way. But to have neighbors and members of the community involved in these committees and task force, and this isn't a criticism of your task force at all. It's just a criticism, a suggestion for a future process that would make it make the law a lot easier for people to accept and to understand, and because there are people discussing it openly in meetings before you're in this pressurized public hearing situation at the end of another long meeting. So, but that document was pretty incredible, actually. It's the June 24th, 2021 letter on the website. It's under Charles Gottlieb. So that was my last point, because I think that.
Thank you, Natalie, thank you for your comment.
Yeah, I have an addendum. I assume, listening to Leslie, you're going to look at a noise ordinance. Is that correct?
I just made a note as I was listening to the comments tonight, and that it makes sense, I think, for us to look at that, because if we're talking about, we have some sort of, we have something included in this, right? And part of that question around enforcement, I think it has more teeth if it is a formal part of our code that we have a noise ordinance. I also think it makes sense if you're going to be applying this to short-term rentals, that it applies to everyone. That's just my note, my opinion. It's not the board hasn't discussed it, and it's one of the things on our list of things that we have to discuss. We have a long list of things, and
correct.
And to Adelaide's comment about the zoning committee, there is a group that is working on. We did solicit feedback from the CAC and the planning board and the zoning board and our consultant and legal counsel saying what part of our code could be written more clearly so that we don't have issues in interpretation of our code. And they provided us with their feedback. We have a chart, and we have a representative from the CAC, who's Pam Scott, from the planning board, who's Emily Abrams, and from the zoning board, Tate Kunkel, all our attorneys, all are practicing. And we were supposed to meet this Friday. I just made a note. I have to reschedule. I have to go to a memorial service. But I do agree that we should certainly post those meetings. And if anybody wants to come and listen to what we're talking about, how we're, including the definition of tree versus far, whatever we're doing, because that's one of the things we're looking at. I'm happy to have the public sit in and listen to those conversations.
I think that'd be a really good idea, because it would make it a lot less contentious and coming in and making comments after people are already attached to changes, And I think that we can take a lot of that that,
But that is a
That's where energy
collaborative
out of it.
process. That's,
Right.
that's the board looking to the people in the community that are
right,
on these boards and volunteering and that have some background in those areas, having all three, two boards that are voting boards, one board that's an advisory committee, and wanting them to help be a part of, help us guide us through that process in addition to consultant and legal counsel.
so
So
that's
I,
why I lead you to that pink letter
Yeah.
again, because they talk a lot about how the community will have more acceptance of the changes and less resistance to a lot of the.
I think the
issues
thing though that
the
we're
community-
doing, just to be clear on the code piece, it's not
Yeah.
a substantive change. It's more language changes to make the
Technical.
substance
Yeah.
clearer. It's not about change, if it was that, that'd be an
Right.
entirely different issue. So, but again, I'm happy, you know, to me, it's the more the merrier, and we're happy to have people come and participate in those conversations.
So did I miss anything else, Mike,
No.
that you didn't?
No.
No.
So thank you for your comments, and is there anyone else comment?
I just wondered what you thought of the legal comments. Were there anything,
They were,
were they helpful?
they were given out to the committee. We're gonna talk about what the result of that is as a group. So a motion to close public hearing?
Yeah, just as an
Yes.
aside,
Thank you, Gary.
you know that I had initially had some serious reservations about, especially the owner occupancy. And I shared that with Mike and the committee, and I mean, I was like really against it, and I told you that.
Yeah,
And I kind of held their feet to the fire,
right.
but they did go back, and they went back to their committee. They worked their butts off
I see that.
to get what I think is a good law.
Mhm.
And I think it's workable, and I think you'll be happy with it, and we'll be able to handle any of the complaints. And I think they did a fabulous job of coming together and taking your comments and Howard's and everybody else's
Yeah.
to do it, so,
It came a long way. for
yeah.
sure.
And just to let you know, members of the committee will be discussing the comments that have come forward this evening. So a motion to close public hearing?
Is there
I'll
nobody
second.
on?
Nope.
Nobody on.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
That's
That,
That's it.
next.
Then you have to close the regular meeting. Now we have to close the regular meeting unless there's other issues.
No, we already did close the
Say
reorganization.
it again?
What's that, Kyle?
You're gonna go review your.
Yes.
Yeah.
So probably what you should do then is go into executive session, do that, then come back out and close your meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's what we usually do.
So if you folks want
Good night, Richard.
to go, you're welcome.
I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
Yeah, really, I don't want you to have to sit here. Thanks for coming out. both.
Thank you.
Well, you want to use my
Will you,
phone?
will you be here tomorrow night?
Yeah, Megan will be here tomorrow night and. we'll be-
I'm hopeful it'll be a short meeting,
Your son's coming.
Oh, you're
so,
sweet. We're gonna go in the other.
but
room.
I'll get you out. Let's look at
Just for a few
that.
minutes.
Okay.
I won't have too long since you want to-
You see, here's an extra
You
copy for
did,
the file.
excellent. I'm so glad. Here, do you want to read some of the comments so you know? Here, I'll give you this. This is, I'm sorry, they didn't have the short-term
You're good.
rental law. I think he wanted to come present in theater.
It doesn't have to, no, no.
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 You're good, yeah.
We're going into executive, right?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to go into executive.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Leslie?
Aye.
Aye, aye.
So I'm gonna
Thanks,
shut
Kyle.
everything
Seeing
down.
everybody.
Nice to
Thank you.
see you.
Thank you.
See you.
Okay.
Appreciate your help.
You bet.
Take care.
This time?
Not this time.